We need, like, the women that IKEA furniture looks like. They want you to be like one of those tables where the legs are just like a spindly birch and that's your body.
And very fragile, delicate.
Yes.
Welcome back to Making It Awkward. I'm Jessica Wilson, dietitian and author of It's Always Been Ours. You can watch video of the show on YouTube and Spotify, and you can support the show by rating, subscribing, commenting, and leaving an Apple Podcast review. You can find me on Instagram at jessicawilson.msrd. Making It Awkward is an independent podcast brought to you by folks who want to seek truth and find beauty. You can email us at makingitawkwardpod@gmail.com. This episode doesn't have a video of our conversation because I got to interview Lindsay during my recent trip to New York and record this audio in person. Last week was the first of the 2 interviews about the Womanosphere or the Womanosphere. For today's second interview, I talked with Lindsay Lee Wallace about the politics of food and the connections to ultra-processed food hysteria. We talk about the performance of the Womanosphere and more of the media side of things, including Skinny Talk and Evie Magazine, the conservative magazine for cis women that encourages us to seek truth and find beauty. In this interview, I get to tell Lindsay which ethnicity of women is the body ideal right now and ask her what that may mean. You know Lindsay Lee Wallace from her previous interview about what makes something news. I was trying to figure out why Dr. Chris Van Tulleken's ultra-processed food experiment got wall-to-wall coverage and was a top news story for at least a week. She was back on the show this year to talk about the shifting perspective about nutrition in news media and how it's aligning more and more with what I've been saying on this podcast for 2 years. If you stay tuned to the episode after the outro, you'll be treated to a delightful outtake from this conversation and why Lindsay's audio was cut into 2 parts. Lindsay, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much for having me back.
I'm so excited. So let's start off with ultra-processed food hysteria updates. So as many listeners know, it was January of 2021 when Dr. Robert Lustig reached out after I had a Washington Post article that said, one myth about food is that all processed foods are bad. That is when he emailed a very, very passionate, very long email saying, you're wrong. What you're doing is letting people go to the store and still buy processed foods. You are a dietitian. You need to be educating people about this.
You need to be physically stopping them from going to the store.
Right. Everything you say makes people do a thing that they should. Yes. Like I have that much... I have that much power. And what I haven't said about the article is I went back and forth with the editor multiple times. They wanted to say, we can't put that in here. The intermediary person was saying, yes, I put vegetables in my ramen for dinner. And I understand that. But the editor, is getting very angry. So I was like, if you can't say this, just don't ask me. That's fine. Right. Okay. So that's where we were. Washington Post has obviously changed their position, as had Robert Lustig, which is wild. We mentioned already that he has serious concerns about Casey Means, but he also recently said that ultra-processed foods are here to stay. We just want to make them healthier. I think that's a wild transition in 4.5 years.
It's very impressive to have learned and changed your position. A lot of people are not capable of doing that.
Fair. That's good.
I think that it's great when you do that and acknowledge that it's happened instead of acting like you have always thought whatever you think at that moment. Because then the people who you, informed, quote unquote, about the first thing that you said won't come along with you. They'll just be like, I used to agree with you and now I don't anymore and I'm going to find someone else who does agree with me. Yeah. And also, obviously, when it comes to Casey Means, there are your motives for changing your position aren't even necessarily based in science. They're just that you want to continue to be in a certain, political alignment.
For sure.
Which then makes the whole thing very so your opinions about food are political? They're not actually just scientific? What do you mean by that?
Yes. Your levels, blood glucose monitoring. Is it just for health? Is that what you're saying? You're trying to sell us something? No way. No way.
Impossible.
Absolutely impossible. So folks are backtracking or modifying their stance on ultra-processed foods. At the same time, people specifically women, are leaning harder into the more restrictive, differently political food choices. And I'm curious about your thoughts on that.
I mean, in terms of like restrictive, especially, there's been all of this stuff with like the rise of Ozempic. That is also like the time for body positivity is over. It was always fake. And now we're all going to actively encourage one another to have disordered eating habits and act like that's a subscription service that you should pay for, because it is now.
Yes.
And there's like there were several articles recently about like influencers whose whole thing is that they have a very explicitly disordered way of eating that they're sharing with everybody very, very like overtly. And then you can even pay to be part of like a group chat that is like what previously I think was like a part of Tumblr that was people encouraging each other to, you know, not eat or to restrict or to do other things that were very harmful for them.
Yeah.
And there are these articles about these women, these influencers on like Skinny Talk being like quote unquote exposed for their behavior, but it's weird because you can't expose somebody for doing something that they're not at all hiding that they're doing. So the entire vibe of it is like the author of the article will say like, you're encouraging people not to eat. And then it'll be like screenshots from the chat that's like, yeah, don't eat that. And it's sort of just like, yeah, no, that is what I'm doing, and I think I'm right. Yeah. And then they will like go into damage mode when these pieces are published, and say, you know, like, I don't encourage anybody to do anything unhealthy. Here are 1,000 testimonials from women that I helped lose a terrifying amount of weight in a very short time frame, and they're really happy about it. So you can't be mad at me because feminism is letting any woman do anything she wants. Yes. And it doesn't matter if it's good or bad for her in any way. But the other weird thing about the articles is that they're mostly written by, in what I've noticed, women who will talk about how the process of writing the article was triggering for them.
Interesting.
And they were like, by immersing myself in this environment, I felt myself like returning to disordered eating habits that I have like had to work on really hard. And some of these people are talking about like being mothers and like being in a situation where they're like making food for their children and thinking differently about that, which is so... Even if you are the person who's thinking critically about this, your whole role is like exposing this toxic part of the internet. It's very like telling that you are yourself still being sucked in. And then also weird on the part of the editor, whoever, that they wanted that to be a part of the story that you wrote about it.
Right.
Also.
That they didn't take that part out. Yeah. Full transparency. Which is interesting because as a journalist yourself, would that make it a fully like unbiased article, or does it become like memoir?
That's so interesting. Also, like, because I would argue that you would be really, really hard pressed to find somebody that you could put in that kind of environment who wouldn't be affected by it.
Good
Specifically, like a woman who is writing about like health and fitness and trends in that area. Yeah. I feel like most of those people are not going to have never ever thought about diet culture before.
Sure.
And also, like, I think that, you know, I think it's valuable for somebody to say, like, I know what it is to have, like, disordered eating habits and this is what it looks like. And instead of just being like, who's to say if it's bad if the lady on Instagram tells you to eat nothing all day? Who knows? I couldn't possibly tell you. Like, sure. But it is weird when the tone of it, like, it shouldn't be ambivalent, but then you're like, is everything supposed to be instructive all the time, or is it just, like, enough for this person to tell us honestly what it was like?
Interesting.
I really, like, I don't have a good answer for that, because I can say, like, how it affected me, but I don't know if that's a good enough reason that it should all be a certain way.
Sure. Makes me think of, especially NPR, because I have critiqued them already. The stories by Alison Aubrey were so narrow in what is healthy and what's not. She was for years the calorie counting queen when it came to the internet. She really never backtracked on that one, but she was the one who got really excited about ultra processed food hysteria. And side note, really hasn't published anything about what is healthy and what's not for NPR since then. Just side note. But yeah, like, it very much felt personal to her and her habits and her behaviors. And I mean, obviously the stuff that I do is personal to me, all of my immersions, but I think I'm upfront about that. Not I think. I'm definitely right. I'm definitely upfront about that. I'm never like, this is the end all be all, but like, oh, look at this opportunity to look at things differently.
Yeah.
Rather than the whole truth and nothing but it. Interesting.
So I've definitely had, like, I want to write about this topic. I'm not going to put myself in it because that makes it seem less objective and therefore less serious or believable. And then the editor wants you to. So when I'm like, why are their experiences in there? Not in a way that's necessarily critical of them, just literally wondering about the process.
Yeah.
Like, who knows? Maybe the editor was like, really tell us, did it make you? And it's like, that also sucks. Who knows?
Interesting. Oh, man. Journalism today. Like, what do we know? I don't know. The ultra-processed food to trad wife pipeline, which you are an expert in. We can introduce the Womanosphere, or what you and I are going to call...
The Womanosphere?
The Womanosphere. I love that there are multiple pronunciations for something that isn't real. But it's really real. But, you know, we're new to it. So I've actually never heard somebody say it out loud.
No, this conversation is the first time. When you were like, how should we say this? I was like, I've never said that, so I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, Cecily and I said Womanosphere, but we debated, like, which one is it? I don't know. Something that I'd like to explore is the connection between food and politics. And the line is always like, food is inherently political. But look at us now when food, you know, did perhaps get so-and-so in the White House now because of the Maha moms and the soil regeneration.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
I also think it's funny because so much of the, like that photo of, you know, they're all eating McDonald's on Air Force One or whatever.
Yes.
And obviously that whole thing is like staged in a way that has layers I probably can't even perceive. Sure. But yeah, the whole idea of people who like are so terrified about their lack of control that they're fixating on what they're feeding to themselves and their children, and they want to retreat to the farmland and drink unpasteurized milk from a cow that they've made eye contact with or whatever that was. Like that obviously thinking about food as political, I feel like has been, when you and I have talked about it in the past, and like when I read your book, it was this idea of like all the structures are connected, but now it's like it's political in that if you say the right thing, you can win political office because you said the right thing about food, which would be great if they were saying things I agreed with. Sure.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, you can become nominated to be the Surgeon General of an entire country.
Or you can win the Democratic mayoral primary of New York City by saying that you want to make city-run grocery stores, and I love that too. Yay, Zoran Mamdani.
Just a little plug.
Had to say that. Sorry.
Many of us are excited about that. So, if nothing, yeah.
I just needed to be happy about like one thing. It was a great Tuesday.
It was. And you showed pictures or videos of yourself being in a Q&A with them, which I thought was great.
That was really fun. Yeah. And they gave me a flower.
Journalism.
Yes.
What is the Womanosphere performing? Or like, what are they showing? What are they getting, do you think?
I feel like it's very, like, Candace Owens recently went from being this, like, borderline, not even borderline, neo-Nazi, terrifying conservative political journalist who is very explicitly making her name reporting very seriously about things to doing, like, deep dives on Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni gossip. And she is like a trained journalist, so her ability to deliver that news is, or quote unquote news is not news. Her ability to deliver that random bullshit is extremely compelling, and she knows that. And I feel like the Womanosphere is about saying like, women love gossip. Women love fashion. Women love babies and flowers and cooking. And that's why even somebody who was previously a hard-hitting political journalist is now talking about celebrity gossip in a way that is absolutely smuggling in the same talking point she had before. But now people might say like, oh, well, I don't agree with her, but she's the best place to get updates about how I hate this lady for no reason.
Sure.
And she's definitely not influencing that at all. And I think that the overarching trend is very much like, this is so innocuous. We just want to talk about things that we think are nice that feminism said we shouldn't care about, but we do. And we're ladies and we're allowed to absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think that that's a very, like, it's very insidious.
No, and I think that's great because one of EV Magazine's taglines is seek truth, find beauty.
Oh, wow.
Right? I think that's great. I think Candace Owens is a perfect example of that. She really is
she's seeking truth and finding beauty.
I mean, yes, that's what you just exactly described. So the number one trending article on EV Magazine is the What My SSRI Took From Me. And I guess they're not talking about depression. They're not talking about how depression was, gone.
No, yeah. I'm assuming that that's a really even-handed look at, whether the psych industry's approach to pharmaceuticals is ethical and has nothing to do with, our current Secretary of Health and Human Services saying that everybody depressed should be sent to the summer camp where the girls in my cabin forcibly shaved my legs when I was 11.
Okay. All right. There. That little wellness farm that you were on.
And that made me better. And now I'm fine.
Is that how it works?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Also in the magazine, I found there's a new aesthetic. So not only is it the 90s super thin, but one of the articles was the top slim secrets of Slavic women.
What?
Yeah.
So it's just like, would you like to be a skinny white supremacist? Like,
right.
I don't know any Slavic women actually,
sure.
So.
But
are they all skinny? Who's to say?
And it used to be French women. Like, why French women, are so thin. But French women's hair might be too brown now. Like, right? Like, we need light brown or blonde hair.
We need, the women that IKEA furniture looks like. They want you to be like one of those tables where the legs are just like a spindly birch and that's your body.
And very fragile, delicate.
Yes.
Even.
And assembling it will make you get a divorce.
Right.
But you're not allowed to get a divorce.
Fair.
Because you're a skinny Slavic woman and marriage is a sacrament.
Yeah, so, there's that connection. Also, in Paris, people may not smell as sterile as Slavic women. And
sure.
Yeah, not all women might shave their armpits.
It's true. They might drink or smoke cigarettes or do things that are bad for their, luteal phase, and that's not allowed.
Yeah. So also, I'm wondering, and this is not something to have an answer about, but the connection to fascism, Russia, Slavic situations. These are things that hopefully people will come around and tell me about.
I hope so too. Although that feels like exactly the kind of thing that is the political conversation there is about unending war and Russia attacking Ukraine, and then the we're just girls being girls version of it is, do you want to be a beautiful blonde woman who is made of milk or something? I don't know. I don't really understand. I'm realizing now that when you say Slavic, I'm I don't really know. She's just super pale, I think. And the the undertones of it are very white supremacist and very she's that thing where it's we're just exploring our culture, and that's why all of these white men have dreadlocks because they want to be Vikings.
Oh, God.
And
I forgot. Yeah.
That is what it is conjuring for me.
Nice. So, yeah, that one's a wild one because the French women and their slim waistlines have been around for literal decades, and then all of a sudden we're not there anymore.
They're not good enough anymore for EV Magazine.
Nice. No. Something else in EV Magazine, Riley Gaines, is for girls who know the difference between fair and fake. She's been called a lot of things. Brave, extreme, controversial. But who is she really? So
she's a woman who can't be a professional athlete anymore, so now she's got to do this, I guess.
Right, she needs to keep getting attention. Yeah. But, I mean, she does look like the what I would imagine to be a Slavic woman.
She's made of milk.
Right. Okay, but back to this one. I would guess that nowhere on this website there is any mention of the words trans. That we're just talking about real women, and then we're talking about men. That's my guess. I've not heard conservative people say confused about their gender.
They have like a totally different lexicon for, because they don't want to like cede ground to the idea. Although that was a thing with the Scrimeti decision, was that in his like ruling, Roberts wrote like a transgender boy, and clearly it was in a way where he didn't intend to imply that he thought there was any such thing as a transgender boy, but I think that they just don't understand the actual content of the decision enough that it was a mistake, and it's always interesting when that happens. Anyway, that's kind of a digression, but it's funny because I agree that they like very deliberately don't say like, this person says they're trans and I don't agree. It's more like this evil man who wants to be in my locker room for some reason.
Right. Yeah. In my bathroom, or will be with my kids in the bath. Yeah. Which is, maybe it's just that trans people don't exist, so we're not going to say it.
I was doing some research for a potential story about how, like, the most popular Gen AI large language learning models, if you say something to, like, if you Google something like, my daughter says she's trans, what should I do? Then the answer that you get is, like, an amalgamation of a lot of stuff, and some of it is, like, you know, the GLAAD website, and then some of it is like a video embedded in the answer where it'll say like, watch this video to understand how to talk to your child about gender ideology, and then it's like pulled from a Christian organization that's literally called like chastity.net, and it's all about like, talk to your child about how, you know, beautiful the body that God gave them is, which is on like as a discrete piece of, that's a great idea. Totally do that. Not in this context.
Right.
So, but no part of it was like, tell your kid they're not trans. Right. It was like, no, the word trans isn't in it. It's all like about like, well, tell your kid that biological sex is a beautiful thing that they're so lucky to have, and all the things that are good about it. And we're not even going to mention the exact name, like it's, this is ironic, like it's Voldemort to say. Yeah. And I also think that they like think that they're ceding ground by saying trans, or by saying like, because they want to keep the framework what they're comfortable with.
Yeah.
I remember when I was in college, I did this research paper that was about Gavin Grimm and his Supreme Court case. And it was like looking at the way that Fox News reported on him, and CNN reported on him, and Huffington Post reported on him, because at the time Huffington Post was more legitimate than they are now. And it was like, what kind of language do they use to talk about him and his case? What like storylines are important to them versus like they don't prioritize? And it was like really interesting, the attempts to like use certain language or not use certain language, or make it a story about like a David and Goliath thing where he is like standing up against something terrifying, versus a story where he is like a tragic figure who is to be pitied, versus a story where he's like a kid trying to live a normal life. But it did make me think really hard about like the very deliberate language choices that a conservative news outlet will make.
Yeah. I do hear we'll say Democrats, liberals, people on the left talk about how trans people continue to be in the news, and whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing, because people continue to be in news and be getting attention. But now I'm thinking about it, that is true, but it is like gender confusion that's in the news. It's not trans people.
Yeah, it feels like there was a period of time, I think, where they would say like, claims to be a transgender whatever, and it would be like in quotes. Sure. And it was like, but now it feels like it's all like, is a boy, is confused about gender, like tragic or sick, but definitely not like a trans person, and I agree or I don't agree that they exist or something.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. So, Womanosphere. That's where we started. The Womanosphere does not talk about trans people, and of course they are, right? At the same time. Trans people don't exist, can't exist. It's all what is unsaid.
And it's very like, because I think that there's a lot to it that is like also familiar from what I have seen, not experienced firsthand, of the way that like, if you were to talk about quote unquote gender confusion with your youth pastor, then you would get told like, there are lots of ways to be a woman. Like, you don't necessarily have to be a boy just because you're not comfortable with being a woman. No one is comfortable with being a woman. It actually feels terrible, and that's how you know that it's true.
Okay.
Which is like so bleak. But I feel like a lot of the like the Evie magazine stuff, the Womanosphere stuff is very like almost getting the point, because it's saying like there are so many reasons why your life might feel unbearable.
Sure.
But we just think that the solution is some hideous conservative propaganda rather than like, perhaps you feel uncomfortable as a woman because you're not a woman. Perhaps you feel uncomfortable as a woman because you're in a relationship where you're being abused, or because you're being given like hideous messages about what it means. And instead it's like, yes, it is impossible to like have a full-time career and raise your children and feed them, you know, exclusively food that you make yourself in your own kitchen and also get sleep. And that's really unfair. What should we do about it being unfair? Yeah. Fascism, I guess.
Right. The way to solve it is, holy smokes. This was a journey. I feel that's what happens every time you're on. Like, when I hear it back, it all makes sense. But as I'm going through it, like, we have gone a million places.
I'm saying just insane things. So I appreciate being able to talk to you about them, because I'm like, you actually know what you're talking about, and so I'm not just like saying conspiracy theories.
Well, and that's funny because I'm like, wow, Lindsay has so much in there. It's all great. Anything else?
You tell my therapist that?
Anything else that I missed? Because I know that you had done a lot of research.
I mean, just something that feels like worth bringing up broadly, I guess, is like so much of the like Evie magazine, Womanosphere stuff has this heavy focus on like motherhood and child rearing and like the health and safety of children, which is such a like dog whistle when it comes to both stuff about food, which is like, what are you feeding your children? Do you care about them? Are you feeding them food that's bad for them? And then also when it comes to like, are your children safe from gender ideology? Are they safe from men in women's bathrooms and other things I made up because I can't actually protect my children from what I am really afraid of? And like, it just feels all so interconnected under the like banner of this concept of like motherhood and womanhood.
I'm glad that you mentioned that, because there was somebody recently talking to her Instagram followers, and I only know this because Casey Means was a collaborator on this post, FYI, who was saying, why are we the weird ones when we don't feed our kids junk? Like, why are we the ones that are weird when we care so much about our children? And I was like, who is on Instagram that you're talking to? Who are you performing this for? Just like, you didn't have to do this.
And, like, no one was gonna come find you and call you weird until you built yourself an empire around, like, giving everyone a hard time.
Fair.
Like, there have always been kids whose parents were doing weird things.
Yes.
It has never been that, like, people who are like, why am I weird? Because it's like, no offense, but like, I've been getting called weird since I was like 5 years old. You can't tolerate being called weird to an extent that you need to like help the ascent of fascism. You're that incapable of being called weird. Like, get over it. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. And I have to be so different than the other people because I have nothing else going for me. So
yeah. I'm actually really dissatisfied with my limited role as a mother and wife. And rather than reckoning with that, I'm going to decide that someone is making me feel small and unimportant because of raw milk and not because of misogyny.
Good call. Lindsay, thanks for coming back to the show.
Jessica, thank you for inviting me back to the show.
Yeah. Let's do this again. We will definitely have ultra-processed food updates and Womanosphere. I feel like we're only at the beginning.
Oh God. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks so much to Lindsay for coming back on the show. I expect I'll reach out to her again to talk about food politics and the ever-evolving media spin on ultra-processed foods. I did look up whether Evie magazine had articles about trans women, and I found a few. Of note, the magazine hasn't decided whether the plural noun, trans women, is written as 2 words or 1. Titles included, notice the difference. Trans-identified men are celebrated for infiltrating women's spaces, but trans-identified women usually go viral for being pregnant. Additionally, is the demure and mindful trend hiding a transgender liberal agenda? And the White Lotus goes full TERF. Since Dr. Robert Lustig has been mentioned a few times recently, I'll rerun his episode next week so that everyone knows what I'm referring to and what wild claims he has made. This has been Jessica Wilson. You've been listening to Making It Awkward. Jen Jacobs edits the show, and she is always seeking truth and finding beauty. It is brought to you by the Legacy of Sacramento Outboard Services and Patreon members. You can join Patreon, linked in our show notes. Again, you can rate this, you can comment on it in Spotify and YouTube, you can follow it on all your media platforms and send me an email with your ideas. Sure, pitch things if you want to. Have a good time. Oh, and friends, I haven't said, keep making it awkward.
Sorry, my phone is vibrating because the alarm to tell me to take birth control is going off. But actually now it stopped recording. Shit, I'm sorry.
No, that's great.
Okay, so it'll be 2 recordings then. I'm sorry. What time did yours start?
Oh, we've only been in for 10 minutes.
Okay, good.
Is that what you have?
Yeah.
A recording that's 10 minutes.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Thanks, Jen.
Sorry.
You're doing great.
But now I'm not taking birth control because I'm monitoring my cycle using the fucking moon
Evie.
and the app on Evie that gives my data to the government because I want Donald Trump to know if I'm fertile.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Anyway, sorry.
It's good. We'll put that as a PS.
Great.
Yeah, that'll be an outtake.